I think it's easy to think that these are very different futures, very different than anything we've seen before in PJM and MISO. But if you look at the trends and the landscape of policy, the landscape of offtake demand, and you start to actually think through what's more likely, this complete transformation, retirement of coal, wind and solar coming in, that starts to look a lot more likely than coal hanging around when you start to think about what are the factors that would have to be there for coal to stay online. Do we think these trends are going to reverse? Do we think offtake demand is going to reverse? Do we think policy pressure is going to ease up? Do we think that regulatory or financial stranded asset risk for new thermal is going to stop? Do we think that the risk of future environmental regulations for coal, which require major capex upgrades, do we think those are no longer on the table? You start to have to really twist yourself into knots to see a future that's different than the one that we just painted. And so, we'll pause here and have a little bit of a discussion. So I'll hand it over to Gary to lead that.
Well, Brent, I really like the juxtaposition between the old and the new, the entrenched versus the new guard, and how this will unfold in the market's ability to, I'd say, be receptive to new technologies in their role in providing reliability. And I think this is kind of the part, it's the unknown that gives people pause, and obviously something that's new in a very staid industry. So how do we work with this kind of transition? You've stated, look, gas is no longer the intermediate transition fuel from coal. It's going to be renewables and storage principally. And I think we'd all like to see a future that progresses towards the end goal quicker and more economically. And I think there is a lot of ambivalence about reliability, and we're in a situation right now where we have a lot of supply constraints and obviously extra demand now in Europe for American gas. And what are your thoughts on the impacts of elevated gas prices on the future of PJM and MISO? And we have sustained levels of gas and the future of gas in the supply mix.
Yeah, so I think a lot of folks, particularly on the coal side, are hanging on to hope that high gas prices is going to be the savior. But the problem is that high gas prices lead to high power prices, and high power prices make renewables look really good. And what you still can't get around is the fixed costs. High fixed cost plants, you want to run them a lot, and the more renewables you build, the less you run everything else. And so that impact of fixed costs being distributed over fewer and fewer megawatt hours is I think it's an unavoidable reality. High gas prices are only going to make renewables look that much better and accelerate it that much more. We're in the midst right now of some supply chain snarls and some interconnection queue processing delays and so on. But I think those issues will get resolved as the market maturity becomes more and more clear. So I don't think high gas changes our view really at all for coal. If anything, it's an accelerating force for renewables.